be very, very bad just because we don't know much about the players. If they're qualifying by beating all the other people in that league, and Slissa was one of the people in that league, they're pretty good. Action! And just quickly address this, Luna is filling in for Dog for game number 1, but he will be back for the future games, I believe.
That is right. We have gone through some scheduling changes and so on. Unfortunately, Dog was not able to make it, but because the change in scheduling was no fault of his, no fault of the Americas team, they were allowed to bring in replacements, which I think is a pretty reasonable solution. We're happy that the organizers are being flexible and allowing us to get a 4v4 on Battlegrounds on here. So Luna will be picking through some pretty attractive looking heroes. They're very curious as to what the minion types are right now, because I think that has a huge influence on that pick. Elementals, for example, for your Millhouse, tokens for your Hook Tusk. Luna got offered some serious power level heroes there, but the tribes would have made the big difference as to what the pick ended up being.
Yeah, she ended up picking Zyrella, and I think that makes sense. She has been putting in work almost solely for mercenaries for this event. She's just filling in, so taking an APM hero like Millhouse, maybe she just didn't feel comfortable with that. Zyrella's good enough and gives her a little bit more scope to think things through and just remind herself of things she did when she was playing Battlegrounds more regularly. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, good start as well, hitting the token start. Of course, you would have rather had the Hook Tusk, but again, I think you make a good point. She is filling in last minute here. Hook Tusk is a very high difficulty hero, a high raw number of decisions type hero. So hitting a token start with Zyrella, if you're going to get there, is equally strong in a lot of regards. Interesting now as to whether Luna stays on 1, goes for the shiny or warrior curve, whatever you want to call it, or tries to cheat the levels with buying a minion for 2 gold each turn.
Talking of cheating levels, that's a thing, standard curve, we don't see much of it anymore. Is that a thing that you're surprised by, or is that something that has just happened with the way that things now work with the damage cap and so on?
I'm not surprised by it, but I have to, at least give credit to it. I always had the suspicion that the normal curve of buy on 1, level on 2, double buy on 3, level on 7 gold to tavern 3. It used to be 90% of games you'd see people doing that most of the time, unless you had like a Refarm curve hero who would play on Refarm curve. But over time, people like Jeef and Shiny and so on came up with all these different curves that applied in all these different situations that eventually there's a curve for every situation, right? They covered all bases to the point where they almost completely eliminated the need for buy on 1, level on 2 type curves.
Which is really amusing to me. I also just got to address this because we won't see this very often at all. Radu is on the cat. It's on Pigglesworth. How on earth could he end up there? That feels like a really tough decision this day and age where nobody dies early anymore.
Well, he's just taking advantage because this is unique. There's no dog in this lobby. He feels like it's a good time to bring out the cat, right? Like, that just makes sense.
Stealing my jokes since 2014.
How is it? What? What is that accusation?
I literally made a very similar joke about 2 minutes ago in Discord, but there you go.
Unbelievable.
It's going to be a constant fight, everybody. Okay, back to the action. Sun yesterday did not get the best pick of heroes. She also got some pretty terrible shops. So Cookie's a relief, I think. At least you're kind of guaranteed to get in the game on Cookie because of that turn 3 discover anything, discover a thing. It doesn't really matter what it is.
Yeah, and actually hitting Swolfin there, having the token start on Murloc specifically, now sets Sun up really well. And there's a bit of debate about whether Cookie or Galewing is the better hero. They play out very, very similarly in just discovering a minion every 3 turns, basically. But I think if you do get a kind of synergy start, like Sun is seeing there, you would much rather have Cookie. Because the way the game works quite right now, once you get into late game, it does get quite tribal-based. There's very few winning menagerie comps that you see. You generally want to be all the way in dragons, all the way in beasts, at least up until the last fight when you can then kind of tech around versus what your opponents are doing. So having that synergy pick of saying, okay, it's turn 9, I'm dragons, I'm going to keep discovering dragons specifically, I think is a little bit stronger with Cookie overall. And you just saw that from Sun, right? She has Murlocs on her board. She discovered a Murloc by choice. And now she continues to have the opportunity to discover more Murlocs deliberately over time. And Murlocs beget more Murlocs. They snowball perhaps better than any other tribe in the game when you get that full board of them going.
This is interesting to me too, because Evelyn is on Eudora. She's sort of committed to pressing the button every turn, which messes up her curve. She's going to start leveling soon. And so this is a decision for either just take a 3 and like it, or freeze a million shops and get a really powerful board later on, and she has gone for the latter option.
She has gone for the latter option, yeah. It will depend a little bit on what her curve was. I would imagine this has not been a hero power on 1 type game with the way her board is looking at the moment. So I suspect she is just going to be looking for a straightforward Eudora curve, and then perhaps just freezing that Wrathweaver 1 more turn, looking for a little bit of extra greed. I think Wrathweaver is a very good pair to be greedy with, though, right? Because it naturally protects you. You have so much tempo just by the fact that you have Wrathweavers in the first place that you can usually afford to be very greedy, which, again, makes it very strong on a hero like Eudora, who is generally pretty weak up until the point where they hit that first hero power reward.
Also worth pointing out, just because I didn't mention it in the intro, you do get an extra point. You get a point for each place you move up the ladder, but you get an extra point for winning. So erring on the side of being slightly greedy when it's close is usually the better option, because that extra point, as we saw yesterday with Europe winning by 1 point, is more vital than maybe you think it is when you just look at the numbers.
Ooh. I suppose with the Vol'jin here, getting a nice juicy hero power target with a little bit of Wind Fury on with the Bonker does make a lot of sense. Slissa doesn't have the best Avenge setup right now. She does have 1 Icky Imp, but she had the opportunity to take Impatient Doomsayer there and then just look for Reborn Taunts and Death Rattles on the following turn. But I think Impatient Doomsayer is probably one of, if not the weakest of the Avenge minions now, since the nerf. Obviously, it was catastrophically overpowered to begin with, and then they toned it down a little bit, and I think nowadays probably one of the weaker options you can have. Slissa chose to turn it down, but I do think as a general rule, keyword Avenge is just better to have on your board than not keyword Avenge, but I think Slissa choosing to go with the Bonker here because of that extra hero power juice that she can get out of it.
Yeah, I was on the timer. You lasted 5 turns without saying it, which I think might have been way over my expectations. I was expecting you to talk about Avenge right from turn 1, but we got there. But obviously, with it being so important, we are going to hear a lot about Avenge, although not so much so far in this particular lobby, because everybody is just... Something that happens a lot in modern Battlegrounds, I think, is you just take the things you're offered and keep your options open until you find some Avenge nonsense. Oh my goodness!
I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's pretty close to the worst thing in the world. Those 2 Wrathweavers are the only thing making that a saving grace right now. I imagine she's going to pick up a Baron here. That is making the Golden Demons a little bit better of a pickup. But overall, a little bit weak. You know, the difference between that and just, a golden Impatient Doomsayer or some other 4-drop you could have picked up that turn is absolutely enormous.
And that's going to make her decision to be greedy with the Wrathweavers quite a good one, though, because at least she's going to get another go at a high-quality minion now. And at least she got some synergy with it as well. She's not going to die anytime soon.
Meanwhile, Simi putting things together with the Mama Bear hits double Mama Bear, going for 5s on the Shudderwock on the 8 gold term, which is a pretty standard curve if you want to be going for 5s. Mama Croc of 3 triples. Hello? I mean, I guess if you're just going to hit it all, why not?
Yeah, that's going to be... Where does she progress from here? Because this is obviously all the cards you could ever want, but where's her improvement now?
You just leverage the ludicrous amount of stats that you have to level a couple of times, ideally twice if you can get away with it. It's slightly annoying because you've dropped below the 15 breakpoint, right, where you can actually die in one shot, which is going to make doing that a bit scarier. But ideally, Simi would like to use this power just to get to 6 and start looking for birds and great wolves and so on, and really just turn this into a power scaling comp.
Just to clear up why Simi is Noffy, by the way, she changed her name for this tournament for Luck, because that is no fear, and there you go.
Ah, okay. I'm glad you knew the origin of that.
In true China tournament tradition, because a lot of the Chinese players do change their names regularly for good luck, so it's in keeping with the hosts of the event.
Okay. It's a bit more scaling for Avalanche. He has plenty of health to play with as well on the Golden Wrathweaver. Not that that really ends up being a factor, because the Mal'Ganis equivalent is now a Tavern 3 minion and is therefore so easy to find. that you can generally always pick it up before Wrathweaver becomes too much of a problem. Plus, I'm sure that all of these players are way too smart to kill themselves with Wrathweaver. Only absolute idiots do that, right?
I've never ever done that, and the 2 clips on my stream don't tell the true story. They're doctored in some way.
I'm interested in keeping an eye on Sun here. Obviously, she did not have the greatest day yesterday from what I saw in the results. RDU really did have to do a lot of the heavy lifting for Team Europe yesterday. And Sun is a fantastic player at the moment. She's very, very high ranked on ladder, so I'm sure her own personal pride and drive is really looking to have her put together a better performance this time around on day 2. She has a great hero to be doing it with, but it's a bit of a mishmash comp right now. Started off in those Murlocs, and it looks like she's diverted now over to the Quillboars and will be hero powering them as such. But it's a little bit short of a real pop-off Quillboar comp, not enough Divine Shields to be going with the Ground Shaker, no amazing way to pay off the Blood Gems from the 2 Bonkers, right? Because the Ground Shaker is not spectacular without Divine Shields. So she's still an Agam or a couple more Divine Shields, Bristleback Knight, that kind of thing, away from really making this happen.
Yeah, just to put that into context, what you said at the start there, with 3 hours of Radu's stream before the tournament started to go, Sun was ahead of him on MMR. And it was only because it was pointed out by some obnoxious person in chat, hey, Radu, you're not the points leader in your team. He's like, oh, well, I want to be. And then he just cruised through another 200 or 300 MMR.
Yeah, she's had a fantastic couple of weeks on stream. You know, real hardcore climbing from Sun. Running up those ranks extremely quickly as we see Collins taking an L, Sun taking a W in a favored fight, if those numbers were to be believed. And Avalyn, I think, much like Sun, she's got the bits and pieces of a comp, but she really needs to start making something happen. There are beasts in, so she can find Parrot to go with her Golden Demons and Baron to start something happen. Unfortunately, no dragons, though, so she can't go full Tarot Ghost and meme comp. The only thing that really works on, though, is Vol'jin, which, of course, we see belongs to Slissa this round, but with no dragons in, largely irrelevant anyway.
She takes the decision to go to 5 here. I think she realises she's getting behind on Tavern tiers and needed to find a star attraction, which she has found to some degree at least.
Yeah, Piggy is a really big deal. It doesn't go all the way to fixing the problems I was just talking about last term, where she doesn't have an amazing payoff, but it's getting closer, right? Like, with 2 Bonkers generating Blood Gems, having +2/+2 for each of those gems is a big deal. The problem is Bonkers become very unreliable very quickly in terms of generating you lots of Blood Gems. So do need to pay attention to that, especially if you're dumping all your gems onto your Ground Shaker, right? Because then you're not improving the health of your Bonkers, which means very sooner rather than later, they are just going to one trade into something and just get you 1 gem apiece.
I will stop doing this shortly.
Such as right now.
Just another part of the intro that was sort of neglected. The players do not know who their opponents are. It's completely in the dark, so you just try and win the lobby, and then you find out afterwards if you just beat your teammates out or not, which means that everyone's trying to do their best. There's no messing around trying to tie and that sort of thing.
Yeah, big shift in dynamics from what we're used to seeing from tournaments, where teamwork is actively encouraged. You know, picking Rafarm, feeding your opponent a deliberate minion, picking Barov, getting information from your teammates as to who's going to win the fights, all that kind of stuff. Manufacturing ties when you fight each other so no one takes damage. That's the dynamic we're used to in team tournaments. This is the exact opposite. You might just friendly fire one of your teammates straight out of the tournament by being way too strong and queuing into them, because, as Neil was saying, zero knowledge. Everyone is on streamer mode, meaning the heroes to them just display as Cookie the Cook, King Muckler, Shudderwock, etc. And they have no idea who they're playing against. They only find out how the rest of their team did at the end of the lobby, which leads to some pretty interesting situations where I believe we saw like a team of America's head-to-head for like 5 or 6 fights at the end of one of the rounds yesterday, which absolutely did not matter because they were both America's players, but they were both fully try-harding as if winning was the most important thing in the world.
Yeah, and as we were talking about that, Sun actually tied with the 1 health RDU cat. So if you still do your best, it might still tie anyway. Right, Slissa's had an amazing turn while we've been talking about that, getting the Golden Shaker into a Charlie. So off she goes now with full Quillboar comp. It's not the strongest of comps these days, but at this stage, it's still quite early. She's in a very good spot.
Yeah, she does get a little boost from being Vol'jin as well, because if she finds the gem transfer Quillbore, she can actually swap the stats twice. You can move the stats with your hero power, but the blood gen buffs then remain on the original minions, so you can then swap them off again using the gem transfer Quillbore. So that is a little improvement that you do get to the comp by playing Vol'jin, but in general, I do absolutely agree. Quillbores are absolutely not the terror they were at launch, when they were by far and away the optimal order strategy for playing Battlegrounds.
Let's see if RDU can survive this fight, because if he can survive it, if those tanks can do their job, then he will start to pick up the cat benefits. But there's a lot to get through here, but tanks do get through a lot of damage pretty quickly when you have 5 of them on the board.
That's 18 damage per 2 minions. And also, crucially, Lorinda, I don't know if you knew this, but tanks actually target the highest health minions specifically, which means they do the job you absolutely want them to do in this situation, which was dealing with the Urzul and the Wrathweaver specifically, whereas your other minions can just value trade the other things if it comes down to it. So yeah, absolutely, RDU just hanging in there, damage capping on the Eudora, which is Aveline in this situation, living to fight another day, and now getting his first proc, which is a second golden tank from the first death. That is Collins, I believe, picking up the death on the Mukla there, top 8ing for Americas, and handing an absolute treat of a minion over to RDU and over to Europe in particular. This could not be a worse start for the Americas, the way that first death has gone.
And look how low everybody in the lobby is getting on health. If Radu can survive one more turn, he's going to have a pick of so many cards next turn.
I mean, you're just tank comp at this point, right? Like, you just take all death rattles and reborns, surely. Like, this is something that I do think RDU struggles with, is not playing for first specifically.
Yeah.
Like, when to just take the EV play. I think that is something that is missing from his game a little bit. But to my mind, it's hard to turn this into a winning comp if someone has absolutely something massive. But in his defense, based on the people we've seen him fight, I don't think he's seen a board that he's outright scared of at this point. So he might actually still feel he can straight up play for first. So I'm not absolutely faulting the way he's playing this out right now.
Yeah, we actually haven't seen much of how Luna's getting along with that Zyrella that seems to be going okay near the top of the standings there. But your dream of talking about Avenge is going to be delayed a lobby, I think, because nobody seemed to get that comp together, particularly in this one.
Yeah, it's true. No elementals in this lobby, I believe, right? Which, seems to be the curse of the tournament. We are not seeing the power of the milk right now, with Lightspawn being the absolute terror at high MMR lobbies and even low to medium MMR lobbies as well. But you are absolutely right. Most of these players have just been playing tempo boards and not really gone for any huge late game setups. And right now, RDU with these 4 tanks is the king of tempo overall. It is extremely difficult to shut that down.
Yep. If you can't get people to kill each other, just kill them yourself as he wipes out the Shudderwock, gets himself some cards. Sun doing him a favour on the other side there, though. It's kind of. Gets him some more stuff. Oh, that's just huge. I mean, it's just a huge thing.
Quite literally, yes. So that was Aveline and Simi going down in one go. So that's actually not great for Europe. It now means that just Sun and RDU were the surviving members of Team Europe, giving the slight advantage, I would say, back over to Americas. But remember that all of these players dying, whether they're Americas or EU, are just feeding outright value to RDU at this point.
Sun scrambling a comp together. It feels a bit late, but it's getting there. She's at least got a theme going on in the deck now, but it still doesn't look particularly strong.
Yeah, and you can still see the remnants of the problems that I was talking about 3 turns ago, right? She's moved towards Ground Shaker. She's picked up more Divine Shields. She has 2 Divine Shields. She has a mech in her hand, which can be added with another Annoyer module for another Divine Shield. I already has one. Okay, fair enough. In which case, that gives her flexibility, but to do that, she's had to sell the bonkers because they stopped being reliable gem generation. So now, where are her gems coming from for that ground shaker? So now you're seeing her think about a transition, even perhaps to full-blown mechs with that Omega Buster. Really, really tough choices for Sun that turn, I think.
W2Y Bill nearly completed his comp now, though. This is starting to look pretty powerful on that board. There's a lot of buffing going on there.
Now, weirdly, these non-golden tanks actually have some game here, because on average, they start shooting the golden tanks before they start shooting them. Or you could just do that, which is a huge, huge deal now for the Zyrella's chances on the other side. This is Luna right on the other side with Zyrella. This is the player that we have not been seeing up until this point. We can start to see why she has been the tempo queen up until this point, because she's been playing tank games as well. But I think that is now going to seal the deal. That is still way too much value over on RDU's side of the board, and this is looking like it might even be a lethal setup from this point.
Yeah, looks like it was about a 50-50 lethal right from the start, and those trades did seem to largely go, obviously after you made your comment, they started to largely go against Luna there. I think she justified that Zyrella pick though, hanging on in the lobby for the longest time, because Radu is now just wiping people out for the second day in a row.
And that now leaves RDU in the lobby with Slissa and Bill. So Team Americas have picked up 2 of the top 3 here, and it's RDU once again as the lone representative hanging out there in top 4 for Europe, once again flying the flag for his team and doing it with a very weak hero as well in Cat here. But just hanging on. 1 HP. 1 HP is all you need if other people start dying first, and you can start picking up all of that immense value.
Yeah, and he did it with the right strategy, right? Just get something that's going to keep you alive and wait for people to start dying. Obviously, you don't always get offered 5 tanks to do that with, but, you know, you take what you're given. All right.
I'm looking around for boards that can survive double golden tank, and I'm not seeing a great deal of them. I'm going to be honest, Lorinda.
Yes, looking strong.
Once again, you have to wonder whether, like, the way for RDU to build a murder board here is just to have as many death rattles as possible. He is continuing to focus on bigger minions, which I think absolutely makes sense. He was handed a free 4650, right? It's very hard to turn that down at that point, even if it restricts your ability to play any demons for the rest of the game, which would have been hilarious if that had been the way it ended after we had joked about it earlier. But so far, RDU has managed to avoid that pitfall.
Something that I think has changed in Battlegrounds much for the better, in my opinion.
Whoa.
Go.
Sorry, if those numbers are accurate, just real quick, RDU's not 100% here against the Ghost, which I'm struggling to believe personally, but I suppose I guess it's Wind Fury smashing into the tanks in particular, something like that, making it happen. I suppose I can see it, but this is looking pretty comfortable, I would imagine.
Yeah, infinite shields as well, which sort of slow the tanks down.
Yep. This looks good.
Yeah, I don't know if they use the same deck tracker we use, but sometimes in specific situations, especially with things getting more shields or death rattles, sometimes it's not quite as accurate as you'd expect, just because it's so much calculation, so few trials it gets to do before spewing a number out.
It has been a bit iffy recently, I will agree. I am the unluckiest Battlegrounds player in the world. However, I certainly should not have died to 3 legitimate 0% in the last couple of weeks, which
I think you should
absolutely
die to
been the case.
Zeros all the time, Sottle.
So while we were focusing on RDU's fight with the double golden tank, unfortunately, Bill and Slissa fought each other. RDU got the free roll of hitting the Ghost, so the 2 Americas players actually cannibalized each other, bringing it down to a straight-up 50-50 between RDU and Bill for the number 1 spot. And it's looking very, very much like RDU is going to bring it home again, continuing the hot streak from yesterday, Lorinda. Hey, he just turns it on. Tournament mode RDU just hits different.
Yeah, very much so. Just looking at Bill's comp, there is an 1181. The tanks, I mean, they will get through it, but they do have to chew through that, and it's not a particularly efficient minion. It's just good, literally, for tanking the tanks. And Bill has picked up a Baron and another bird while we've been talking, so this could be closer than Instinct makes it feel.
Yeah, that has made a huge difference now, because that's a ton of extra stats with the Golden Wolf, with the multiple parrots, with the Baron, then also the fact that the Gas Coiler could potentially pop with the Baron as well, particularly because the tanks will target that more heavily than the Baron, since it's picking up the buff from the Parrot.
And Bill, either he's seen the numbers at the top or he's seen the result, but either way he's happy.
He does seem very pleased. He is coming into this with a favoured fight. Like I said, that Baron and that extra bird made all the difference. And I think with the way these early attacks have gone, that's a Wolf going down, stacking way more stats. And RDU does not have the juice left to compete with that. That is the last minion to go down. Just the tanks left to take care of. A valiant effort from RDU, coming all the way back from 8th place with 1 HP to nearly taking down the lobby yet again. But it is going to be WTY Bill taking down lobby number 1 of the day for Americas, and a good performance from Americas overall. Slisser coming in 3rd. On top of that as well, thinking it's going to turn out to be a pretty good first lobby for the Americas team.
Yeah, and I haven't got the stats in front of me, unfortunately, but I feel like Bill and Slisser both had very good days yesterday as well. And if you'd asked RDU, even RDU, who loves to win every single lobby, do you want 2nd place after 6 or 7 turns into that, or even after just hero selection? He'd gone, give me the 2nd, we'll let the others fight it out, I'll take that. So, good work from everybody concerned, but I do believe that will give Americas a pretty good lead going into Game 2. But we must remember yesterday, when Americas played China, the first 3 places in the first lobby were all China. Americas looked dead. Me and Raven were like, how are they going to come back over 2 lobbies? Because this is such a huge advantage. They were ahead after the 2nd lobby. Like the point system here, the swings are gigantic. 1 good lobby and you can gain 15, 20 points on your position. And it's not going to be a huge lead.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why those consistent performances are very important for individual players on your team. You mentioned Slisser. I believe Slisser picked up at least 1 lobby victory. I believe in the last Battlegrounds lobby of the day was a Slisser victory, where she was extremely sleep deprived at that point with all of the schedule changes that we'd had up until that point. Slisser putting in another good performance again today. We're seeing the same from RDU. That's why those performances are important, because you can't just high roll 1 lobby and then fall asleep, as much as various people would have liked to have done that throughout the tournament so far. You have to keep picking up those points, keep hitting those top 4s, and even find a way to turn a top 8 into a 5th, right? Which is something that RDU was starting to do there. He just then, because of that miracle first death on Collins, handing him the 2nd golden tank, that changed that game from a tempo as hard as possible, try and kill some people, maybe get 5th or 4th kind of game, into a straight up win the lobby potential kind of game. He did fall up just a little bit short to Bill's insane last few rolls there with the extra Parrot and the Baron coming down to close out the lobby. But there you see the results of it. It was a good first lobby for Americas, coming out to 21-16 in that first one, with the stars, of course, being Bill and Slisser both landing in those top 3. And yeah, shout outs to Luna as well, coming in as the pinch hitter. She did fantastically, picking up a result that I'm sure Dog would have been happy with, picking up 5 points and a 4th place. Congratulations to her.
Yeah, I mean, it was literally the last second, not even exaggerating. She got out of bed to get ready for her Mercenaries match, and it's like, hey, we need another player because of the situation. And she just stepped in there, took a hero that made sense to her, because she's been a good Battlegrounds player in the past, do not get me wrong, but she has focused on Mercenaries for 2 or 3 weeks now. And with that in mind, just stepping in there and getting her job done, which is get an average performance, get out of there, waiting for Dog to come back.
Yes, we are still, I believe, working under the theory that Dog is returning for the 2nd lobby, but these things are constantly in flux, as is the way of this tournament, so we will keep you updated as we go along. But yeah, massive shout out to Luna, just being a good teammate there, really. As Lorinda said, we followed the conversations going down on Discord. She had maybe 15 minutes notice, right? From not thinking she was doing anything, just watching the tournament, or being ready to watch the tournament as everyone else was, to suddenly having to run around, get ready to play a game of Battlegrounds at the highest possible level against perhaps the scariest team in the whole tournament, with the Europe team. So she did fantastically, but a big shout out to WTY Bill and Slisser as well for really taking down those high scoring slots for the team. Collins picking up the top 8, picking up just the single point. Collins is a fantastic player. I'm sure he will recover nice and quick. But yet again, little bits and pieces of problems running through the Europe team. I think they would have had higher expectations than the way things have been going overall. Yes, they did scrape through day one, but it was largely on the back of a single player in RDU that was getting most of that work done. And so far, it's continuing to be that way. And it really shouldn't. These other players certainly can carry their weight. In particular, Sun, who is very much RDU's equal when you look at ladder rankings and MMR overall right now. So, she will be looking and hoping to step up her game a little bit and really start putting up those numbers to compete with RDU on her own team, because I think it's an interesting way to look at the tournament, right? Not only are you competing with everyone else, there's probably a little bit of friendly competition in amongst the teams themselves as to who's going to be the carry as well.
Yeah, and that lobby wasn't... It felt like everybody had to cobble something together, apart from RDU, who just took tanks and let like nature take its course. Everybody else was really struggling. I think Evelyn did get that double Mama Bear or the Mama Bear Croc nonsense going on, but everybody else was just sort of taking the cards they were offered, trying to keep their options open and just doing what they could and find out who ends up at the top. And Bill was the one who actually managed to get a comp connected at very last minute as well. I think he was behind until that last shot.
Very last minute, yeah. It was Simi who put together the Mama Bear board, right, with the 3 triples on the Shudderwalk, and then Avalyn had the Demon board with the Urzel, the Baron, the Death Rattles as well. Just wasn't quite enough to make it through that mid-game stage because everyone else in the lobby was going tanks, right? And I think that's always an interesting dichotomy where if elementals are in the lobby, one person will get hold of the Lightspawn board and they'll fill their entire board with 30-30s and 40-40s and laugh at the tank players, right? And if you then, as a tank player, queue into the elemental player, you get smoked because you kill nothing. Like, they just outright annihilate your board. When elementals aren't in the lobby, it's very hard to put enough numbers on the board to be able to stop double tank or golden tank, or in RDU's case, why not both, double golden tank? So quite incredible, honestly, that Bill was able to put it together at that very last moment, just finding enough stats with the beasts in the end. Picked himself around a 68% favorable, attacked first, I think, which is probably what his initial celebration was about, because attacking first with Parrot is probably the biggest coin flip in Battlegrounds overall. So I think that's what his initial pop-off was all about. And then, big lobby for the Americas to take down early.
So, would you like to talk about Avenge for a while, Sottle, given you haven't had the chance yet, as we've got some time to fill before the next lobby? Why is Avenge so powerful right now? What is the cornerstone of making it so good?
So, Avenge is very, very good because very, very good players understand how to abuse it. So if you play against some players who are like 8k, 9k MMR, you'll see people take like an Avenging Lightspawn, for example, and then, they'll have Reborn Taunt, Icky Imp, Harvest Golem, something like that. They'll let that board die once, and then they'll start buying elementals. They'll start buying 8/8s, 9/9s, fill up their board because they want to be strong. That's a terrible idea most of the time. What you'll see good players do is continue to be as weak as possible for as long as possible until they're in that RDU position, right? Until they have 1 HP left, and 1 HP is all you need. And at that point, you've pumped your elementals so high that in one turn you can just start buying 20/20s, 30/30s, depending on whether you've picked up a second Avenging Elemental along the way. And you can just be so monstrously powerful in a single turn that no one ever comes back from there. If you try and cash out of Avenge too early, the problem is you get too strong too quick, and then your Avenge doesn't work anymore. You're not milking anymore. Your milking has stopped, and then that's your power level for the rest of the game. You have to re-find another win condition from that point because you've cut off your milk supply. So at this level, it's kind of disappointing that we haven't really seen any elemental lobbies, because I do think that playstyle of triple into a 4, find an Avenging Ellie, stay as weak as possible, and then get strong in one turn is a real cornerstone of how top-level Battlegrounds is played. And we're kind of seeing a misrepresentation of what high-level Battlegrounds lobbies look like because we're dodging elementals every single time. So, you can take everything that I've just said and apply it to the other Avenge minions as well, to the Witchwing Nest Matron, to Impatient Doomsayer to an extent, even to Green Thumb, right? Like that kind of thing. and it still applies, it still holds. It's just that avenging the Lightspawn is just so far above and beyond those other ones in terms of the power level it then cashes you out at when you choose to cash out, that not seeing Ellie's in the lobby is just a bit of a problem right now. And I do really like Avenge because it does force you to understand things like sometimes it's correct to deliberately lose a fight, which is a hard concept to grasp. And I think Avenge really holds your hand through doing that once you start to get a handle on it. But perhaps a couple of the Avenge cards are just a tiny bit overtuned right now in how much power they can throw out at you.
It's one of the things that makes people hit the wall in Battlegrounds and then suddenly break through. You find it. The original one was with Lightfang, where you're playing it. Well, no, the original one is actually with Golden Wrathreaver on one as Reno, and you just go, I always do this because I always win, and then you get to 6k MMR, and suddenly that's not working anymore. But Lightfang's the one that most people fall into as a beginner. You go, oh, my Lightfang makes my board really big, and you do. You beat everybody, or you used to. It's a little bit slow now. And you keep beating them, you keep beating them, keep beating them, and you hit sort of 7k, and it's like, I don't win anymore, I'm so unlucky. No, you're doing it wrong for your MMR level. And this is the same thing with Avenge. That elemental strategy of just playing some 2020s on your board and hoping it all goes away will get you MMR up to 8-9k, as you were suggesting, but you're doing it wrong. So you'll hit a wall, and then when you work out what Sottle's talking about, you break through that wall and move up. And talking breaking through the wall, I've broken through the wall into the countdown. So I'm going to sign
We're
out
in the
now.
Nether Zone! We're in the break and we're still live! How is this legal?
Luckily, I knew. So, yeah, we'll come back in about 9.5 minutes and talk about some more Battlegrounds.
Peace.